when I think of 9/11, I remember being with I was with Dixon Hughes as our CPA firm, and I remember our managing partner, Eddie Sams, was in from North Carolina. And we were meeting in the conference room, and somebody opened the door and said, the towers have been hit. And then we went in and watched TV, and together we saw both the towers collapse, and it was just overwhelming. The interesting thing, Eddie had flown in from North Carolina. Of course, all the flights were canceled, and we got a truck. One of our partners got a truck for him to drive back. But after that, I immediately did what I think most of us did. I called my wife, and I called both my children, called Charlotte and Lee and Laura, just to see how they were doing. And then I immediately started calling partners in our firm, and we had several that were stranded. I had one that was a private pilot that was stranded up north and was not allowed to fly for a week or so, but just checking on people. But then also in my accounting relationships, I knew a lot of people in Manhattan, and I called several of them, and one person had commuted in from New Jersey on subway and had literally probably been one of the last trains that had gone over under the World Trade Center. There was a major hub underneath there, but probably one of the last trains that had physically gone through and survived. So it was a day that was like none other, and I remember it like it was yesterday.
My 9/11 experience, it was pretty different from most people. I was working in a midweek Emmaus walk at Camp Sumatonga. No televisions, no radios, no cell phones. We even took away their watches. One of our clergy folks, his wife called him and told us the news. We met, we broke the news to the pilgrims who were there, stopped the walk for 2 hours, and as you can imagine, there was shock and anger and fear and lots of tears. And then we allowed the pilgrims to vote whether we should continue or not, or go home to our families. And we voted to stay because we felt like the best place for us to be, and the most important thing we could do was to stay at Sumatonga and pray for our country.
Just after September 11th, our family was supposed to fly to Boston for a family wedding. We ended up having to drive, which took us right through New York City on Friday after September 11th. We were listening to the local radio in the car, and all I remember is they were asking for all the things that they needed donated, and they kept asking for socks to be donated, to be brought down to the coast in New Jersey and shipped over to New York, because all of the rescuers' socks were being ruined through all the water that was being poured on the site. So it was just this startling image of driving through New York, still seeing the smoke billowing from the World Trade Centers, and just hearing this desperate need of socks on September 11th.
So what I remember about 9/11 is that day I actually rode home from the bus from school. I was in 2nd grade, and my dad typically picked me up from school, but this day I rode the bus home, and I got off the bus, and Dad typically would meet me outside to go inside to the house, but this day he wasn't there. And so I was really confused as to why he wasn't meeting me outside. And so I got off the bus and went inside, and I'm calling Dad's name, and he wasn't anywhere. He wasn't answering. He wasn't answering my calls. Like, I couldn't find him. So I'm looking around. I'm in the kitchen. I'm looking in the living room, and he's nowhere to be found. And so I finally found him in my parents' bedroom, just sitting on the couch, staring at the television screen that's in their bedroom. And it's at that moment that I knew that something was going on. He kind of looked at me, and I just saw in his eyes that something really horrible had happened. I mean, I was young, but I knew something was really going on. Later that night, I remember going with my dad to the church that he was pastoring at. And we opened up the doors, and we rang the bell that was in the church and had a night of prayer that night at the church. And while I was young, I still remember that day, and it's impacted me even to this day.
Like the others, I remember exactly where I was on September 11th. For the first time, my husband Charles and I were going to leave our 4 children, and I was going to accompany him on a trip to Miami. He was already in Miami, and our 2 preschoolers were still at home with me, and our 1st and 2nd grader, I'd already kissed them goodbye and told them that Mom and Dad would be back on Sunday. There was breaking news on the television, and it was like nothing I had ever heard, and my immediate instinct was to feel so protective of my family and my children because I was afraid. My husband Charles called and he said, I won't be flying home. I'm driving home right now from Miami, and I need you to get some money out of the bank account. I don't know what's going to happen next. Fear shrouded that entire day, and I'll never forget it.
What I remember about 9/11 is that we had just purchased a house here in Birmingham. We were so proud of it. And my parents, who live up in Lexington, Kentucky, could not drive themselves, so we were able to get them to come down for a few days and to visit with us. And when there was time for them to go home, I needed to drive them up to Nashville to meet my aunt, who would then take them on home to Lexington. So we hopped in the car that morning. We were just driving up. We didn't have the news on anything. We were just enjoying life and just talking and talking. And when we got to the Tennessee state line, to the Welcome Center, we got out for a rest. And as we were walking around up there, some people started talking about something was going on up in New York. They weren't sure what was going on. There was a plane crash or something going on with that, and so, but it was really confusing. And so we got back in the car and we drove on up to Nashville. And when we met our aunt in Nashville, we did find out more and more details about what had happened. And so I had to go ahead, and my parents had to go on back to Kentucky, and I had to turn around, and on the way home I listened to the radio as much as I could and found out what was going on. And then got back to the church and we just prayed. And that's what I remember about 9/11.
On September 11, 2001, my wife and I had agreed to take custody of a teenager that was in our congregation to prevent him from going into foster care. And so that morning I went to the courthouse for family court and was in the lobby watching the television when strange events began to happen, and the horrifying moments of seeing the second plane hit as I was watching. I pulled out my phone and called my good friend as we pondered what was going on. And so that day for us began a lot of questions about how we would be able to help a child who didn't have a lot of resources in the past and needed a lot of help. And also for our country that was facing a whole new set of challenges that it didn't know how it would face as well.
I was driving to the office at First Methodist in Florence when they broke in on the radio to tell us that something was happening in New York, that it appeared a plane had hit one of the major buildings. Didn't really have a lot of information, and I don't know that anyone really knew what was going on around the country, around the world at that time. So I got to the office and went into the staff break room, and they brought in a television, and we were all watching, and suddenly there was another plane. And then we hear about the Pentagon, and we hear about another plane that goes down in a field, and then we're trying to figure out what to do. Probably this weekend, many of you will be telling these stories like you've heard us tell. Where were you when you heard that the towers had been struck, and when the towers fell, and when the Pentagon was on fire, and when the plane goes down, when phrases like "let's roll" and terms like Al-Qaeda enter into our language, and when it seemed that the world changed in a morning? You'll tell those stories. I remember that day very well, as many of you do. And I remember that evening, without really any advertising, without social media to drive it, just through word of mouth and just through need of soul, the sanctuary at First Florence filled with people. We came together to pray. You probably went to a service like that yourselves, praying for so much on that day, not really having the words that seemed appropriate. I hope that today, as you remember 9/11, you remember all of those events, as you tell your stories of where were you when, I hope you'll also pause again to pray. To pray for the families that have been forever changed because of this day in our history. For us, it's a day that fills our televisions and it gets into our minds for a moment. But there are a lot of families in our country and around our world. This day lives with them every day. It redefined who they were as a family. They experienced a loss that they'll never forget, not even for a moment. And so, pray for them today. Pray for all the families affected on 9/11. Pray for our world, because we know that the hate and the ideologies and the divisions that caused an event like this to take place, they're still out there. They're still out there. Pray for our world, that we can get beyond this need to fight and to hate. That biblical image of swords being shaped into plowshares, that will make some kind of step toward that, maybe beginning today. Pray for our nation. Some people said that on 9/11 that our country became so united in that time. It was a unity that we had not experienced probably since the Second World War, when the country came together to support the fight. We're a long way from that unity now, aren't we? Division seems to be the topic, not unity. We all seem to be right, no matter what we're talking about. We would rather attack each other verbally and on social media and in 1,000 ways than to have a discussion, and even to respectfully disagree at times. Pray for our nation, that we can find unity, that we can find a brighter tomorrow. I remember when this happened that I had two children, and Michelle and I were planning to have a third at that time, and I remember thinking, what will the world look like? And what will our country look like for my children when they grow up? And here we are, a couple of decades later, and now we have 3 children, and now I have 2 grandchildren. And I wonder what this country and what this world will look like when they grow up. Pray for our country, that we can be that beacon of hope for the world around us, and that unity can once again come to this nation. And I also invite you and hope that you'll pray for your role in all of this, in shaping the future going forward. I remember a song that was used in a lot of worship services after 9/11, and the opening line says, "Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me." May we pray that today, all of us. May we be agents of peace. Blessed are the peacemakers. May we be peacemakers in our world. Not just on the global scene, not just on the national scene, but may we be peacemakers in our home. May we be peacemakers in our community. May we seek to unite rather than divide. Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me. 9/11 changed our country, changed our world. But today, let's pray that we can change it again. Change it for the better. And find an even brighter tomorrow as we live as God's people and as we seek peace. God bless you. God bless the United States of America. And God bless this beautiful world.